chat window. And you can see Katie just submitted. We will have a Q&A portion at the conclusion of the presentation where we will read your submissions for Kim to answer. And but before we get started, we'd like to give you a short clip from our sponsor, Graves Gilbert Clinic, and they are the title sponsor of Business at its Best series. So Kenzie, I'm gonna let you do that.
At Graves Gilbert Clinic, their top priority is the health and safety of their patients, employees, and visitors. And because of that, Graves Gilbert Clinic is now offering telehealth visits, which allows patients and physicians to use an app to communicate via video chat. Any patient who would like to schedule a telehealth appointment is encouraged to call their Graves Gilbert Clinic physician's office directly, or call the Graves Gilbert Clinic telehealth hotline at 270-746-5790.
All right, well, thank you, Kenzie. And so it is my pleasure today to introduce our speaker today, Kim Wilson. She is the owner of Wilson Counseling, LLC. And Kim is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years experience in helping the helping profession. She started her private practice in 2009 and has offices in Bowling Green and Russellville, Kentucky. With a team of 21 professionals, the Wilson Counseling LLC offices provide adult, child, individual, family, and couples counseling. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kim Wilson. And Kim, thank you for partnering with us on this today. It's all up to you.
Thank you for having me. So as Dawn introduced, I'm Kim Wilson. Very nice to meet all of you. Thank you so much, Chamber, for the invitation to do this webinar this afternoon. I hope that the information you gain from it, you take home with you or to your friends, family, workplace, coworkers, so that we all get through this as a community. I've got a PowerPoint that I am going to attempt to share. There we go. All right. So our topic today, managing stress and anxiety during a pandemic. Who knew that we would need to figure out how to do a pandemic? I don't think anyone living has experience with this. Anybody that was around for earlier pandemics, the St. Louis or the Spanish flu, would have been so young when it occurred, maybe no conscious memory of it. So it's a totally new thing. And we think with modern technology, modern medicine, that this shouldn't be happening, but indeed it is. I suppose as it turns out that the more accomplished we become at travel, the easier it is to spread things globally, not just in a smaller community. So let's talk about, we're going to start with, what is anxiety? As soon as I figure out how to.
Hey Kim, if you go into presentation mode, it'll just show us the slide and you'll still be able to navigate through.
Okay, I have to. The problem is, if anybody can guide me, my Zoom controls are over that, and I don't know how to make those move.
Okay.
I bet if I exit full screen, there you go, Kenzie. I had this working earlier. Maybe I was already in presentation mode. There we go. Okay,
there you
now
go. Great.
Thank you very much. All right. One more question, Kenzie. Let's see. Nope, can't do that. Okay. So anxiety can range. It has a range from a very low sense of unease, something's not quite right, worry, all the way up to panic symptoms. So the word anxiety has incredible range of meaning. It has a good purpose. In general, its primary stems from the need to survive. So being able to have excessive adrenaline in time of crisis would stem from anxiety that gets that brain chemical reaction going. We hear stories about people with superhuman strength, or we all know the feeling of zooming in when there's a crisis. It seems like the big things are right in front of us. So from the beginning, anxiety's purpose is to keep us alive. However, our brains are not always good at identifying the actual severity of anxiety. So we are going to talk in a bit about bringing in logic and balancing an emotional response with logical thinking. Everyday stressors, we all have them. Work, finances, relationships, children, upcoming events, whether it's a deadline or a new situation, something you haven't done before. So healthy levels of stress are actually good for us. They create energy and they push us to conquer something, take something new on that we've never done before. Then we get that wonderful feeling of having achieved and done something. So stress in and of itself is not always bad. The key is going to be balancing and keeping it manageable, reasonable levels. So anxiety, of course, we all have DNA, and we're going to have some genetic predisposition to levels of anxiety. Some of us just tend to worry a little bit more than others. Different things about our lives influence our brain chemistry. This is somewhat genetic, but it's also environmental and kind of programmed from our childhood and the things going on around us. Environmental, this is going to be largely your socialization, how you were brought up. So if you were brought up with, let's say, a mom who worried a great deal, you absorb that like a tree absorbs raindrops. We absorb that and it becomes a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world. We have societal. For this one, my mind goes to 9/11, the societal level of anxiety after the terrorist attacks. Everybody was worried. Is this going to happen again? And so it was a much larger me, am I going to be okay? Are my kids going to be okay? It was a country that worried together. Medical, if we have health conditions, some are very easily treated, some are not, some are unknowns, and that can create anxiety. Life events, again, terrorism being a thing that we have to stay on top of. I know when I was a kid in school, that wasn't a word I even knew. School shootings, that wasn't something that had been heard of when I was in school. So the busier the world gets, the more in touch we are worldwide, the more we're impacted by life events. What does anxiety feel like? So no two people will have exactly the same set of symptoms or signs for anxiety, but a feeling of restlessness, keyed up, on edge, not having energy. A lot of times sleep is a good escape, and so it's a natural body response sometimes to want to just go to sleep and not have to deal with whatever's going on. We might see shaking or sweating. Probably one of the more common, difficulty focusing, concentrating. We find ourselves I was reading a book and I realized that I don't know what the last 2 pages said. So I have to go back and reread them. Or I feel myself kind of zoning out, going blank. And I realized that some amount of time has passed that I didn't have conscious awareness. I had just drifted off. Irritability. This stems from a sense of helplessness. Humans do not like feeling helpless. We like to control our environment. We like to control our world. Definitely like to control our lives. And I get cranky when I'm not able to do that. Muscle tension, we're familiar with this. Could be neck or shoulders or back. Some of the physical symptoms, headaches or stomach problems. Changes in appetite, it might range from no appetite. I realized that I haven't eaten all day and I never got hungry, to the opposite, that I self-medicate with food and am eating to feel better. There's a Facebook page post a couple of weeks ago that really cracked me up, that someone said that they needed social distancing from the refrigerator. I thought that was pretty good. And then another really common way that anxiety can show up are sleep problems. So trouble falling asleep is usually related to difficulty managing what's on your mind. You know, we think that when we go to bed, we should be able to relax and say, oh, okay, today's done, a sense of relief. But no, that quiet without other distraction is often the perfect time for random troublesome thoughts to show up. When we have trouble staying asleep, it's usually because we're not getting into those deeper sleep levels. So conscious thought, we're kind of on the edge, teetering from one side to another. And so we might wake up and fall back asleep, or be really aware of dreams and difficulty telling if we're asleep or awake. So any of these, if you have just one, it's probably not a big deal. Life happens. If you have several and they've been going on for some time, then maybe we rethink, okay, maybe I've got more anxiety than I thought, and I need to look at what I want to do with this. Social media has an impact on anxiety. I guess social media has an impact on everything these days. The number one, and there's more and more research coming out about this, is compare and despair. We see other people posting, and they post this picture perfect family, everybody's smiling, and there's this fabulous background, and we feel like it makes us feel like ours is inadequate when we compare. Glamour shots, or really neat places to go, or somebody got a new car or a new house, whatever it may be. All these images we compare, and they can give us a sense of inadequacy if we're not careful in keeping it in perspective. I would not typically post my worst pictures on Facebook. I'm only going to post the ones that are impressive, right? So remember, everything you're looking at, somebody posted for the point of being impressive. And that's not a bad thing, but we have to keep perspective on it. Of course, even doing this Zoom webinar, and as a therapist, I'm doing telehealth. So just finished group supervision with some of my staff, and we were talking about the impact of these not being real interactions. So it's face to face. You're looking at my face, I'm looking at yours, but it's still not the same as being real. Social media gives us a sense of a relationship, but it just doesn't have the same level of human interaction that we need. Social media, I'm not a huge Facebook person, but know quite a few who are, and they say they have a hard time stopping. They're just going to look at a couple more things, but every click leads to something else. And there's this sense of I might miss something. So between it never being never ending and that feeling of missing something, We can spend hours and hours on social media, and again, they're just not the quality of real interactions. All right, so this anxiety thing, what can I do about it? Well, let's start with COVID-19. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Everybody knows about it. It is not like we're keeping a secret from our kids. If it's a workplace or a relationship, everybody's thinking about this. So the more we talk about it, the more we help each other keep a good perspective. We can look at it as an opportunity to create the mindset, the attitude toward it that we want. So for instance, if I use the words, I am petrified that I am going to get the coronavirus, my level of anxiety will match the word petrified. If I say, I'm concerned about the virus, so I'm going to be cautious, then my emotional response is one of caution rather than fear, that higher level of anxiety. So just through having conversations, we can keep our own emotional perspective where we want it to be. We can set the tone for our children, for our coworkers, for our spouses or significant others. And we help each other focus on facts. I could probably find, goodness, there's got to be thousands of news sources that between the TV and the internet I could access as fast as my fingers could click. Focus on facts. Limit your exposure. By focusing on facts, then we don't start going off into outer space on things that have not yet happened or that are not proven or that we don't know. So we help ourselves by focusing on what we actually know. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So in therapy, one of the big things I'm doing is trying to help others and myself. I'm doing it myself too, by creating an opportunity. So I'm working from home these days. I'm trying to enjoy being home. I've probably been inside my house more in the last month and a half than in the past year and a half put together. So I'm trying to enjoy. I cleaned out a file cabinet, found some stuff that was like 14 years old. Figure if I haven't needed it in 14 years, I'm not gonna. So I'm getting some projects done. And quality time with family. We're figuring out how to Zoom. We've tried doing some gameplay on Zoom. Being creative. Of course, thank goodness this is happening in spring. If it had to happen, can you imagine this being in January when it's bitter cold and so terrible outside we can't get out? So it's spring. Be creative. Kids aren't as familiar with building things with sticks and rocks and dirt. So help them create their own imaginary games, getting outside, staying away from the pre-designed toys. We definitely need new routines for the home-based learning. For those who weren't already homeschooling, this wasn't in the plan. And so we've got to create new routines and recognize the old ones just aren't going to work. The projects you haven't had time for, starting a new hobby. I finished a jigsaw puzzle. So something that I really enjoy doing and just don't usually have time for. And so I've really tried to think about what are things that I like to do and enjoy the slower pace while I can. We can also teach kids about keeping a slower pace and some downtime. Kids rely on immediate gratification and stimulation from screens. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Those things, getting outside and helping kids build their imagination, is healthy for them long term. You've got an opportunity to change daily routines that gives kids something really important. It's not as easy to get these days. All right. So with your family, making time to talk about the outbreak and making a plan. There's that thing we talked about a minute ago with humans not liking to feel helpless. The more I make a plan, the better I feel that I have some control over what's happening to me, my family, my immediate environment. So I look at what steps am I taking. Governor Bashir early on said, be a part of the solution, not the exception. That just really struck a chord with me. So we made a decision to close the office and that we would all function through telehealth and try to do our part with social distancing. How often are you sanitizing? Are you washing hands? Are you keeping the 6-foot social distancing? Are you keeping your gatherings or direct contact with people very small? How many people are going to Walmart? What's your plan? What are you doing? Limit the amount of news that you watch because it's depressing. There's research on secondary trauma. This was especially true. Hurricane Katrina was one of the natural disasters that was researched. And when that happened, there was that period of rescuing people and people on rooftops and stranded and all these different things. And we were just glued to the TV. We were mesmerized by it. And then unfortunately, that constant exposure to that creates secondary trauma. So we want to limit the amount of news, the amount of media, get the information you need and stop. For coworkers, for staff, for family, be a role model. When we model something, not only will I internalize it and it directly impacts how I'm feeling, but I get to set the stage for someone else. So we want to model a healthy lifestyle. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. And we want to plan fun, quality time. So again, it's that taking advantage of a slower pace and doing something with it. You'll create wonderful memories and nothing like a crisis to draw people closer together. All right, tools for reducing anxiety, something everybody should have. All right, the first one, 4-4-4 breathing. So you're going to inhale slowly through your nose and then hold it for a count of 4 and then exhale slowly. It only takes a few repetitions of this before we find our mind regrouping and feeling a little bit more in control of ourselves. Progressive muscle relaxation. You start, it's pretty easy, tense, intentionally tense, clench a group of muscles, and then as you relax them, breathe out. I like starting at toes and working up, but really you can do any muscle group that you choose in whatever order you choose. Scaling is probably my very favorite therapeutic technique. And it's so useful for not just anxiety, but any other emotional distress we may be experiencing. This brings in the logical mind that I mentioned earlier, and we use numbers. So if I look at the amount of risk from skydiving without a parachute, that's a 10. That is not going to work out well. If I look at the amount of anxiety that there could be a devastating hurricane in Kentucky, that's a 0. Not going to happen, right? So by using logic, I assign a number to the reality to bring reality to my emotional responses. So if I look at the risk of someone that I care about getting the coronavirus, well, there's a possibility, unless there's an underlying health condition, they should recover. So I can use that scale. So perhaps a great grandmother with multiple health issues, unfortunately, there's high risk with that. If I look at one of my children who are healthy, then that number is going to be much lower. Another excellent anxiety reducing skill is guided imagery. So you pick a place, a person, a time, something that makes you feel relaxed and peaceful. I like the beach, and it gives lots of opportunity to use this. So using all 5 senses, I picture myself at the beach. What am I going to hear? I'm going to hear waves. I'm probably going to hear some seagulls. I may hear a radio or children playing in the distance. What am I going to see? Hopefully sunshine and clouds and watching the water, the waves, lots of glistening and reflections. What am I going to smell? Fresh air. I don't know if I would say it smells like salt. Maybe it does, but it definitely smells fresher than what we would find in Kentucky. Not nearly as much pollen either. What am I going to touch? Sand, water. Taste, again, is going to be just a fresher sense. So I just took a little mini vacation. I got my mind off my troubles. My body feels more relaxed, and I've regrouped. And this last one that I've listed, the challenging irrational thoughts. Ask ourselves questions that put fear in perspective. Emotions overreact. Emotions are often like a 3-year-old that gets overly invested in this moment and doesn't look past this moment. So when I ask myself questions, my brain has to use the logical part to respond. So I could ask myself, how much risk am I of getting COVID-19? Well, I'm social distancing. When I did go out, I've worn a mask. We've closed the office. We're very conscious of what people were around. See how I just put that in perspective? So yes, there's some risk, but I'm lowering it as much as I can, and I'm keeping it in perspective. And then another one of my favorites, the zebra and the lion. So for a moment, imagine that you are a zebra out on the savannah, and you and your zebra friends are eating grass. You think you hear something. You look up, you look around, and you see nothing. All your zebra friends are still eating grass. You saw nothing on the horizon. You can go back to eating grass. If you look up on that horizon and you see a lion, you should run. It is fact. Lions eat zebras. If there's a lion, you need to do something. If you have imminent danger or something present today, then there needs to be a reaction. Remember that anxiety is about survival. But because anxiety is an emotion and emotions overreact, we use our logical brain. I scanned the horizon, no lions. All my zebra friends are still eating grass. I can relax. And then I say, thank you, brain. So we're balancing. If you see this pattern here, we've got to balance out emotional responses by using logic. All right. So this whole thing of not liking to feel helpless, the opposite of helpless or reactive is proactive. So make a plan. When I think of living a balanced life, remember we've all been taught about having a balanced diet, and it's supposed to have protein and grains and dairy and vegetables, and so we all have this image of a healthy plate of food, and it's going to have lots of green and lots of color in it, right? Well, we want to do the same thing with our lifestyle. So we want to balance our sleep, our play, our diet, and our mental exercise. Surfing social media is not mental exercise. There are tons and tons of apps that are little brain games, little puzzles that we can do. So if you need to do it through technology, that's fine, but look for one that challenges your brain and exercises your mental muscle. Self-care is definitely something that we have to be intentional about, and we want to look for things that give me a sense of productivity, of worth. So if I lay on the couch all day, then I can say I needed a day of rest and relaxation. But if I do this 7 days in a row, I start feeling like I'm not getting things done that need to be done. I'm not taking care of my responsibilities. I'm not being productive. So we've got to balance that out. Even finishing my jigsaw puzzle, it was 1,000 pieces. It was really hard. Gave me a huge sense of accomplishment. Finally, I got that thing finished. And then I got to look at the whole picture. It's still on my dining room table. I don't want to tear it up. Trying to find things away from electronics so that we do get deeper sense. Anything that has a screen keeps us at surface level. You just can't get to depth when there's a screen involved. Making sure that you consider hobbies and relaxing an important part of the healthy diet, just like you would include vegetables as something that, excuse me, you had to be healthy with your food, then we need to include hobbies and relaxation. Just because I can work 24/7 doesn't mean I should. Use the clock to take breaks and use the clock to manage your time so that it matches your values. So a little bit of a challenge here. If you say family is my #1 priority and what I value the most, make sure the clock matches that and that the clock hours you spend on family things lines up with that value. It's kind of a fun little way to make sure I've got my priorities in the order I want them, and I'm working to keep them in that order, to honor the order that I put them in. And then the last one is empower yourself with tools and skills. So I'm in a profession that I want to pass out tools and skills so that others have the most meaningful, satisfying life each of us can make. We only get one life. So share, but empower yourself and recognize that you're an individual. Empowerment, increasing your confidence, strength, capacity, capability. So this is on you. You have the ability to empower yourself. You can seek out skills, you can seek out knowledge, you can improve your capacities and your capabilities. I included this worksheet at face value. It's 8 questions, and they're really short. And it seems like it would be easy. I'm glad to share this with you later. Here's another challenge. This is harder to do than you would think. Most of us could, in the main categories, and probably half of them, we would be easily able to find 1 or 2 things. But I find even adults who are wise struggle with this. And so being able to identify my own strengths and qualities and own those goes a long way towards empowerment. All right, so then there's beyond healthy stress. So there's typical levels that are always going to exist. There's more to do in a day's time than you can get done. But when it starts interfering with daily functioning, when you find that you are not leaving home because of anxiety, or you're avoiding other situations, not going to some kind of gathering because there's going to be more than 4 or 5 people there, when you find that your thoughts are frequently worrying or distressed, if there's been a traumatic event that you just can't get out of your mind, this is when we start getting into potentially a range that it's time to seek professional help or at least guidance from someone else. So mental health disorders, we use the DSM-5, came out in 2013 was the most recent revision. The difference between a mental health disorder and a personality trait is that impact on functioning. So for almost everything in the book, every disorder, I probably have at least one of the traits or features. It's a question of whether that trait or feature limits my functioning. If I'm having trouble going to work, if I'm avoiding people, if I'm not leaving home, things at home aren't getting done. I can't get myself out of bed. I've got some kind of addiction developing from self-medicating, whether it be, oh goodness, social media addiction, cell phone addiction, food addictions. They're not all illegal. In fact, probably some of the more dangerous are legal because our brains justify those. Research is pretty solid that for a mental health disorder, combination of psychotherapy and medication has the best outcome. And one of the wonderful things happening in the current times is that doctors and mental health professionals are working together and referring back and forth to help people get past the limitations, the things that are stopping them from functioning. Prevalence, some numbers really grab my attention, and this is one. Almost 20% of adults have had an anxiety disorder. That's 1 in 5. So when you go to Walmart next time and you see 5 people, one of those have been diagnosed or would have qualified for a diagnosis of a mental health disorder associated with anxiety. That's a pretty big number. The next number is pretty interesting, that women tend to experience anxiety more than men. This probably goes back to some of the common gender traits, the nurturing of females. Men tend to be a little bit more task-oriented, so we see that showing up there. I included adolescents in these numbers. Almost 32%. That's a third. Again, we're back to Walmart. 1 in 3 adolescents qualifies for an anxiety disorder. I think that really reflects, a lot of it does come from the internet, because that compare and despair we talked about with social media is definitely going to show up in the younger generation. It's how they think, and social media has always been a part of kids' lives, where for most of us adults it has not always been. And so if I had peer pressure from the 1,000 kids inside my high school building, a couple of hundred of them in my grade, that's kind of Warren County average numbers. Well, unfortunately, social media and the internet allow me to compare myself to every teenager on the planet. So there's a lot more pressure with it. There's also a lot more passive-aggressive ways for kids to be mean to each other, posting online and criticizing or making fun of, threatening, bullying. I work with Mike Lennon, former BGPD detective, with the Cyber Safe Teen project that he's working on, because this is such a prevalent issue in our current society. Again, we see this number was higher for adolescent females than for males. But some numbers that really, hopefully, alert you to this is a thing. This is really a thing. All right, let's talk about some of the types of anxiety disorders. We have generalized anxiety disorder. Most of the time, this one doesn't put its finger on, I am worried about this. It is going to be, I'm worried about everything. And I worry every single day, maybe some days not as much as others. And in a single day, I probably worry about 10 different things. Social anxiety, as it sounds, is going to have to do more with social interactions and fearing judgment, fearing that I'll look foolish or embarrass myself or am not good enough, don't fit. Separation anxiety, most often found in younger kids, but not always limited to that. Children find their comfort in being with a parent who's the protector, and we see it the first day of school, kindergarten. There's often separation anxiety. Most kids will be able to navigate that within a couple of weeks, but some really struggle with it because they want that parent for their comfort and security. Phobias are more specific fears, say a fear of heights or a fear of spiders or of going out in public. Panic disorder, this is your higher level of anxiety, so a panic attack can include hyperventilation, accelerated heart rate, a feeling of frozen, and intense fear. PTSD from trauma, a traumatic experience that we can't seem to get to move into long-term memory where we go back to kind of normal functioning. It stays with us day after day. Even OCD is anxiety-based. So for persons with OCD, what we see is repetitive movements bring comfort. Doing things in a routine brings comfort. So some of the things with anxiety are anxiety reducing through their repetitiveness, and then other things, obsessing, like I might surf the internet to read about the coronavirus for hours and hours and hours. My anxiety says I've got to know all I can, and I find that I can't stop. All right. Research shows children with untreated anxiety disorders are at higher risk of performing poorly in school, missing out on important social experiences, and then the biggest risk, engaging in substance abuse. And then for adults and children, the risk of developing a co-occurring mental health disorder increases dramatically. So some of our disorders, we have a hard time figuring out which came first, chicken or the egg. So did anxiety that has been present for a long time create depression, or was I already depressed and it created anxiety? Other conditions can play in. Let's take ADHD. So a kiddo with ADHD, even an adult, feels like they can't do things right. And so then when a test is coming up, I'm anxious because I don't think I'm going to be able to do well. I'm going to mess this up again. That creates anxiety. Then after the test, indeed, I don't do well, or a project at work didn't go as I'd hoped it would, then I'm depressed. I can't do anything right. I'm not good for anything. I'm not as smart. I'll never get this. I'm going to get fired. 1,000 thoughts can come in. And each of those feeds those conditions, sometimes creating another condition. The risk of using a substance to feel better is one of the biggest reasons that we have the level of substance use problem in our country that we have. We want to feel good as often as possible, and so we do whatever we can. So maybe it's retail therapy and I shop online, or maybe it's chocolate cake. If I eat too much chocolate cake, I gain way too much weight and I'm not healthy. I bring on other health conditions. I don't feel as good. That can lead to depression or anxiety. I don't feel good about the way I look, so then my anxiety, self-confidence, self-esteem start dropping. Anxiety up, self-esteem drop. So it creates cycles. And then I just need to feel better. I just need something to feel better for a little while. So alcohol, marijuana, but the list of substances is very long, and we just want to feel better. Humans are geared that way. We want to feel good. And most of us will go to some pretty significant lengths to try to find that. All right, so there's our reason that we want to try to figure out, is this impacting functioning? Everybody worries sometimes. Sometimes we can put our finger on exactly what the cause is, and it's situational. And in a relatively short period of time, it's going to take care of itself. So maybe we don't need to do anything with that. But if it's been present and it doesn't seem to want to go away, or I can't quite figure out what's causing it, or you're seeing the results of functioning being limited. I'm getting in trouble at work. I am not able to keep up with my job and not able to get things done. Same thing with home-related tasks. I haven't talked to my friends in however many weeks. I'm avoiding or isolating myself. When we see those bigger changes, those bigger impacts, then that is when it should get our attention that we are at a point to start seeking assistance. And that is my presentation on anxiety and how COVID-19 relates.
All right, thank you, Kim. We did have several questions submitted, so I'm just going to go ahead and start reading those off for you.
Okay.
Our first one, what suggestions do you have for someone to help an employee who already has high levels of anxiety?
Those tools, I'm glad to give the chamber my PowerPoint so that others can access it, going through that list of tools and practicing those things. It's really easy to say, oh, deep breathing, that's ridiculous. That's not going to do anything. But when I create my own remedy, which is practicing some of these things, then there's progress. You'll see it.
Okay, and what is your recommendation for someone who is exhibiting multiple symptoms of anxiety? And is there any way to deal with that doesn't require, a prescribed medication?
Absolutely. When I start with a new client, my goal is we're going to try to not use medication. So a therapist is going to work to teach those coping strategies, apply them to daily life, and hopefully provide somebody that your fears can be expressed to that's going to help you keep them in perspective. So whether it be a therapist or just a mentor, respected, wise person that can be that balancing.
Okay. What are your recommendations for those working from home with young children where it's difficult to find a work-life balance?
That's tough. That is really tough. So number one, kids today rely on stimulation from a screen or from another person, and their ability to entertain themselves, be creative, and be independent is more challenging. And so this is a place you get to make opportunity or take opportunity to build skills in your kids. So prior to COVID-19, I always recommended a go bag. Every kid should have in a vehicle 3 activities to do while they're in the car. So one of them might be a screen. One might be an action figure, and it might be a coloring book and crayons. So when the parent needs to work and needs the kids to be entertained for a period of time, we're going to do two things. One, we're going to use a clock, and we let the kid know when they're next going to have social interaction with us. So you could say, I'm going to work until 2 o'clock. It'll say 2:00 on the microwave. And they're going to have a list of 3 or 4 things that they can do to entertain themselves while they're waiting for 2 o'clock to arrive. You can let them know what you're going to do at 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, we're going to fix our snack. Since they know what time it's happening, they'll be able to deal with that amount of time that they're independent better. Imagine if I tell you I'm hungry and you say, not now. Well, when do I get to eat? In 5 minutes, in 5 hours, in 5 days? So by using time, we give kids reassurance of what to expect when. And we create some independence.
How can we prepare kids once they do go back to daycare and school, assuming that we're going to have a little separation of anxiety?
One of the big things, so I see a little one in your lap. One of the big things is we remind them of the things we're doing to stay healthy. So we come back to that plan that your child can wash their hands, that you're going to be waiting for them when the school bus arrives, or you'll be in the car rider line, whatever case may be. So again, we're using time, when they're going to see me next, and what to expect. But we remind them of all the things that we're doing to stay healthy. And we remind them that you're a healthy kid. Even if you got the virus, you'd be okay. Or even away from mommy, at this time, we're going to be home. And then we're going to spend the first 30 minutes playing whatever you want to do.
The tools that you suggested earlier, would you use the same methods for children, or is there a different style of methods that you would use for kids?
So I adapt to the person that's in front of me, and I'm going to take those same skills, but I'm going to adapt it to a person's personality, their age, even their physical ability. And so kids can count to 4. They can do the deep breathing, and you can teach them to clench their hands and relax them for that progressive muscle relaxation. Younger kids, you might use scaling of 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 10, because you don't have to have a wide range for the concept to work. So yes, you use it, you just adapt it to the person that's going to be using it.
Okay, are there any other questions? Go ahead and submit those. You can do so through the chat.
No.
Okay.
All right. I'm not Bree Duncan right now. I am Dawn Johnson still, but my technology changed a little, so I had to hop on somebody else's laptop. I did want to say, Kim, thank you so much. A lot of that information is very, very valuable. And I wondered how many people were actually sitting there breathing and counting when you were talking about that. That was kind of, and I've done that before, and it does truly work.
It really does.
It really does. Again, thank you, Kim, for joining us today. Anyone that has any questions, we have recorded this, and it will be in the Business at Its Best library, accessible through our partnership login portal. We hope you enjoyed this, and we do have other Business at Its Best coming up. One is on May 7th, and the facilitator presenter will be Eagle Fulfillment, and they'll be talking about taking your business online and how to e-commerce. So look forward to that one. Look forward to registering for that. You can actually go online and register for that one right now if you're interested. And I hope everyone stays well and gets a little less anxiety-free, or more anxiety-free. Thanks again, Kim.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kim, if you want to share your slides with me, we can post those with the recording of this.
Okay, I'll email it to you, Katie, and then it's yours to share. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a fabulous day.
You too.
Thank you.